Hello everyone, welcome back for another book review. So today we are talking about this one. So this is another one from DJ Conway. It is from my husband slash mother-in-law's collection. I think it was more my husband than her, honestly, but yeah, so we're talking about this one. So this book, I think they have changed the cover and some of the design since then. When I tried to look it up on Amazon, it shows these as used, so I guess these are like this particular thing is not in stock anymore, and they've updated it, and I think there's like a new forward and stuff and whatever, but this is the copy I have. So the premise of this book, the only thing I really knew going into it is that my husband didn't love this book because the way he described it was that she tells you about things and then tells you not to work with them. And I kind of noticed the same thing. The premise of this book is really just for elementals and like mythical creatures associated with the elements. It's not really about the actual like air, fire, water at all, really. It's the majority of each chapter is focused on the different things associated with them, and progressively it gets less and less and less. You can always tell authors who have like, they start off strong and then like progressively get less. And so by the time we got to the fifth one, Spirit, the only mention was really archangels, which I don't personally include in my practice at all. And the beginning had quite a number of them. Some were a little different, and I'm not, like, it's one of those things, Conway kind of did her own thing, and so kind of got to take that as it is too. So like I said, the majority of these are different mythical creatures, so they range from all sorts of different things. Each one pretty much has a different fairy attached to it, and then of course from there different things. You have like fire drakes and the like mermaids, and you also, ironically, you don't really have too much mention of dragons, but you have a lot of gnomes and dwarves and elves and things like that. She does have a decent amount of Norse things included, but I don't know how common those are outside of DJ Conway. And when I read through the Norse book, it very much did not feel like it was authentic in any way. It kind of felt like she was just pushing the Norse into the box she wanted them to fit in, so it makes me hesitant to follow what she says in this book about it. For example, she's having you call on Sleipnir, which is interesting. Like, I don't know that I would put Sleipnir with the element she does, and like some of the ways she just like describes things is like it was vicious Loki and he hooked up with a giant and that's how Sleipnir came to be, and I'm like, there's way more into that tale, and like to just like, words matter when you speak. And so saying that Loki is vicious is like, take a step back. He is problematic, don't get me wrong, but to say he's vicious, he's just, we always must have a mischievous god in the mix. Every single pantheon has one, and like honestly, if you read his antics, they're kind of hilarious sometimes. Sometimes he gets on everybody's nerves, but we all have a person in our lives that does that. So to say he's vicious was just kind of like, okay. And so anyways, so she tells you to work with Sleipnir, and then she also mentions like the horses that pull the chariot for Sol, who is kind of in charge of the sun, and then also later mentions like the wolves that are eventually trying to eat the sun and the moon. And then, like, she tells you about them and it's like, don't work with them. And I'm like, why are we mentioning it then? And that these horses are very intimidating, but then you can work with them for this thing. And a lot of this book was just this constant back and forth. Oh, and then she had the goddess Ran. Again, probably mispronouncing it. But she is the goddess who, in a way, is kind of a death goddess. She rules over the ocean, and specifically for, like, people who die at the ocean. You typically don't find bodies at all. It's pretty rare when somebody goes overboard that you find them. And so her role was to collect the souls of those lost at sea. It kind of depends on where you read it. Like, she kind of has like a holding area, and then eventually they kind of move on. But this book, she talks about how the daughters of this goddess are like malicious, and that she's out here, you know, they're causing all of the turmoil in the water to get more souls and whatever. And it was just kind of like, okay, it's one of those that I want to confirm it with other texts and not necessarily base everything off of what DJ says. So like, again, I tend to focus on the Norse things because that's what I'm interested in. And so she does mention the Norse dwarfs that are supposed to hold up the corners of the earth, or whatever, the elements, things, directions. And so it's just one of those things that I kind of would like to discuss with somebody who knows more about the Norse, or find it in a book that talks about it a little bit more that's not DJ Conway mentioning it. So I'm curious about eventually exploring that, and like, would you invoke them at the same time as you're calling in the elements or not? Like, it's a thing to explore at some point, but yeah, like I said, I always tend to focus on that right now as I read books, and so it's interesting when she includes stuff like that. And like for Spirit, she has it be the World Tree, which I thought was an interesting take, honestly, on Spirit having a representation. I was like, I can actually kind of give you that one, because like everything's supposed to be in the World Tree, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, the majority of this book is talking about the different magical creatures, the different dwarves and fairies and whatever. And while that's interesting, that's not what I'm interested in when I'm looking to work with the elements. As I was reading this, I kept comparing it to Scott Cunningham's book on the elements, where I think he has two, and the way that he goes about working with the elements versus her method, it's constantly this thing of like, don't touch the elements, they're really intense, you don't want to work with them, you need to be very advanced before you even touch any of this stuff. And it's like, why are you telling me about it? If it's a book for the beginners, don't mention it. If it's a book for the advanced, trust in their skills, tell them what they need to do. But instead she just says don't work with them, and it's like, so why are we including it? What's the point? And honestly, as I mentioned not too long ago in a video about the like no-no gods and the warning labeled gods, I feel like that applies to the elements as well. People often say that like, and she includes it in this book, that like fire is super dangerous, but it's like all of them are. All of them can be incredibly dangerous, but we also need all of them simultaneously. We need food. It grows from the earth, right? Also has earthquakes. They're not pleasant to experience. I still have PTSD from the earthquake we had. It wasn't even the big one we were supposed to have eventually. But we just pray to all the gods that it doesn't happen in my lifetime, because I don't want to be here. That was really, I don't like earthquakes. And then you also have wind and tornadoes and stuff like that, but also like we can't function without air. Like that's the thing that will kill you first if you don't have air. Like within a couple minutes, like you're not gonna live. You need air. And then you also have like fire. Our ancestors were obsessed with fire because like cooking food and having warmth is really nice, especially as it's getting cold. But also it can get incredibly out of control. But it's also the one that we can control the most out of all the natural disasters. We can control fire. We cannot control an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane, you know? And then of course hurricanes and water and tsunamis and stuff. And then you also need water to function, and it's the majority of our bodies. So like there's a balance there that she just is constantly like, don't touch the elements. Oh man. And the elementals with them. And it's like, why are you telling us about stuff and then just not encouraging us to work with them? What is the point? And pretty much all of them come with a warning label, so it kind of felt like a pointless book, honestly. I don't necessarily agree with her that everything is a no-touchy, but just the way she went about it, it just was like, if that was the point of the book, why? Like, as just a giant warning label? Because that's kind of what you like, at least for me, that's what I ended up feeling like after reading this book, is everything was a warning label. And given my history of her other books, it makes me question a lot of things of like the authenticity of stuff, because she's been known to need to be fact-checked on a lot of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't what I hoped it was going to be. I would like to deepen my relationship with the elements. I've done it over the years, and I've just kind of neglected it over time. And it's like, this book did not offer anything in that category at all. There was very little. And the most you have is like meditations and like some random spells, but like, again, you have so many warning labels attached that it was like, why? And again, I just constantly was comparing it to Scott's book, which I'll probably read soon, just as a comparison, because it was like, his approach is like, you can go to the elements and like the natural world is like the easiest thing to go to, and like it's not a dangerous thing. So anyways, obviously I'm not like the world's biggest fan of this book. I think it's interesting to start the journey in learning about the different mythical creatures associated with the elements, and to just kind of begin learning about it. But I would not really go to this if you're just looking to work with the elements in and of themselves, because it doesn't really go that much into the essence of air and fire and water and earth. I don't really look at air and be like, oh, I gotta work with the earth fairies, or I go to the earth altar and be like, I gotta work with the gnomes. Like, earth is its own entity in a sort of like a deity. And so its own special energy, and so for me it was like, this did absolutely nothing to work with those things in particular. There's like one or two things that kind of caught my eye, but for the most part, not really. Like, I think there was one stone that I was like, oh, that'd be kind of an interesting way to work with that particular stone. And then there was one spell that I was like, oh, maybe I'll include that. But honestly, it was like, that was it for this book of something that would be even remotely worth my while. So I'm curious how it works for other people. There weren't that many reviews on this book, honestly. So I don't know what the overall opinions are of this book. It's one of those that I have a lot of books that are probably not the most popular and common, especially as they are aging. This is actually from the same year that the last book was that we talked about earlier this week, from 2006. So it's one of those where you're like, is it just an old book and there's a reason that we don't really talk about it? Because even on Goodreads there wasn't that many reviews, or at least the reviews didn't have any words associated, so that doesn't really help. And then on Amazon there wasn't that much either. So I'm curious what your thoughts are if you have this book and you've read through it, what your thoughts were, because I'm in the same boat as my husband, that it just was like, why are we talking about so many things that we're not supposed to work with? And it just has a warning label constantly if you can work with it. Like, you have to be advanced and you have to do it very specially and blah blah blah. So anyways, I'm curious your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Thank you to my patrons. I will have their names here on the screen if you'd like to get access to exclusive content. It is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. And until next time, do make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day, and I will see you all soon. Blessed be.